Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Today we've got an interesting topic, private lending perspectives with Brad Laddusaw. Matt's here to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie and Cy, for putting everything together. As always, I appreciate all the work behind the scenes. So thank you guys for putting it together. Glad to be back here in December for the last show of the year, and I've got a interesting and fun guest today that I've come to know over the last year and a half or so pretty well. And so I'll introduce you here in a minute. But Brad, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. You introduced me as interesting, like some of our borrowers on the deals they send us. So I know it's gonna be a good conversation after that opening.
Yeah, so Brad is a, private lender down in Southern California, based out of Oceanside. Interesting, Oceanside, man. I remember when I was a kid growing up out in Hemet in Riverside County, when we'd go to the beach, we'd always go to Oceanside. So I did
It's
that. That's many, many years ago, and I know you now regularly surf those waters, I believe.
I do. My office is literally just a skateboard ride down the hill from the pier. Now I got my two boys. I get out in the water as well. So I mean, I went in the water 3 times last week. It's been nice.
I love it. You know you're dealing with a Southern California guy when he skateboards to location. Man, I remember when I came down and I met you for a beer, like I was at last year about this time maybe,
Yeah.
and we met at I forget the name of the place, but like you skateboarded over from your office.
I remember walking in and you're like, did you ride that down here? I was like, yeah, I'm just right up the hill. I went to Johnny Manana's. So that's my jam. Like, it doesn't matter if you got net worth of 20 million plus or you're just looking to get into the game. I'm taking them to Johnny Manana's.
Johnny Manana's and skateboarding over, man. I love it. So Brad is also the president of the California Mortgage Association. That I've attended that the last couple of years. So maybe that's a good place to start, Brad, and we'll get into kind of start anywhere, go everywhere here. But um, tell us about that. Like, how did you come to take on that seems like a pretty big role and time-consuming role, but tell us about that.
Yeah, I was kind of voluntold, I like to say. I'm just kidding. So I originally joined California Mortgage Association, I believe it was early 2014. I was working for another company at the time. And if you needed anything compliance based, resources provided, attorneys, service providers, other practitioners that have been through the various war stories over multiple cycles, you went to the California Mortgage Association. This was pre hard money, pre private money, uh, before there was an industry for conferences. Let's just put it that way. You would
Yeah.
go to the CMA. I got involved with the education committee because that was a great way for me to learn the industry and provide ideas, maybe to present on. And then over the years, I just got a little bit more and more involved. And it was a few years ago. Shafiq with Stonecrest was going to be president, and he asked me to be vice president with him. And I told him I'll be vice president as long as I don't have to be president, because I got two
Vice-
young kids at home. I don't have the time for it. I could help out behind the scenes. Sure as shit, 2 years after,
Yeah, of course.
there.
That's why the vice president leads right to the presidency.
But that was I tell him that was the biggest bait and switch of my career that I've ever been a part of on the receiving side of it. But over the last decade, I got so much out of the California Mortgage Association. I felt, I'm going to make the commitment for my time. Maybe provide a little bit different type of energy, a little bit different type of messaging and visibility across the board to really set it up for years going forward when I'm long out of the industry. What a lot of others don't realize, the CMA is actually a nonprofit trade association. We have a pretty large voice in Sacramento. Our lobbyist, Mike Belote, has been in the industry for damn near forever. We have a great relationship with the Department of Real Estate. I was actually emailing the DRE commissioner this morning on a few items. So, if a lender or a broker has exposure to California real estate or lending, being involved in the CMA, I feel, is a very integral part
Yeah.
of making sure you're still in business a decade from now. And that's the biggest value add I could share
Yeah.
about CMA.
Yeah, and being in business as a private like as you know, I've been a private lender multiple times over for many years. I know that you've been doing this a while. How did you get into private lending in the first place? So give us a little bit of your origin story as terms of like where you came from and starting your own company.
I kind of stumbled into it. I went to Cal State Fullerton, double majored in accounting and finance, thought I had my shit figured out. I was like, I'm going to go into public accounting, go big four. I'll be there, call it 5, 6, 7 years. Then I'll go into the private sector, maybe assistant controller, controller, then CFO. After 2 years, I got pigeonholed on a big job and got burnt out. So I was in downtown Los Angeles for training, and I reached out to my business partner, Corey Siegel. We went to college together, and he was working for a private lending company based out of downtown LA. He was just one of their originators, and we went and grabbed lunch, and
Mm.
they were looking to bring someone on board to help place the trusted investments. I was only 25 at the time, and I was like, I will never work in downtown Los Angeles. I will not commute to downtown LA. I live in Irvine. It's 2 hours each way. Before I knew it, I was making that commute for 3.5 years. So they brought me on board. Um, that was 2013 as an investor relations. Within 3 years, I was VP of finance. So I was overseeing accounting, operations, underwriting, loan servicing, as well as privately placing the loans. My business partner is VP of sales. We were both engaged with our now wives. He lives in Brea, so he was commuting about an hour and a half each way. We knew we wanted to have kids one day and wanted to be able to be present and be home. So we looked at ourselves and we're like, shit, do we put a bet on ourselves? So we started SNL Capital Group a little over 8 years ago, about 8.5 years ago, and haven't looked back. Now I have my oldest is almost 6, my youngest just turned 4.
It's
Corey's got
awesome.
a daughter and son, Ellie and Casey. He's coaching softball and t-ball. I'm coaching t-ball, getting them in the water, and it's funny how it comes full circle. But when I go and speak with students at Cal State Fullerton, I tell them you do not need to have your stuff figured out. The students that think they have their stuff figured out, they're going to be the first ones to get burned out
Yeah.
on that path. But the important thing is just to establish that network, maintain that network, because you don't know where you're going to be three,
Yeah.
5, 10 years down the road.
Yeah, keep your eyes open, meet a lot of people, establish that network. It sounds like a true entrepreneurial story. So you guys started the business then, let's say private lending 6, 7, 8 years ago now. How did you go about that process? What was your thinking in terms of the kind of loans you guys want to do and kind of how has that evolution been? And how do you fund the loans as a private lender?
Yeah, so from the onset, from my auditing background, heavily process based. And Corey and I like to say we stay in our lanes. He's more borrower client facing, breaking down the deal structures. I'm the numbers geek behind the scenes, worrying about our compliance, our capital allocations, our closings, and all of that. But I knew from the onset that we were going to outsource high liability items to an independent third party. The backbone of any lending company is loan servicing. If I'm talking to someone considering getting into the private lending industry today or 10 years ago, I mean, first thing I'm doing, you're outsourcing loan servicing. A lot of risk and regulatory issues with that pertaining to trust accounting. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but that was the first thing that we did. We streamlined the accounting behind the scenes. Everything is with technology improving. It's pretty, I don't want to use the word easy. It is easier to handle your accounting and today versus 25, 30 years ago. And then the infrastructure, underwriting parameters, wanted to have those set. When we first started, we were heavily in the fix and flip. Cosmetic fix and flip, we always like that. I've always been petrified of the luxury space. It just takes too long to land that plane in the state of California. Holding costs get are too much. So we focused on the cosmetic side. Back in 2017, that's right when institutional capital is really beginning to pick up steam and flood the marketplace. So we started to see leverage go up and pricing go down. Um, we are backed by high net worth individuals and a few different family offices. So we follow your traditional trust deed investment model. But what differentiates us is we do not fractionalize our loans. I am not trying to put 5 to 10 investors on one loan. We use single investor per loan up to $10 million loan amount sizes. In the state of California, if you're privately placing loans, you cannot place a loan. Let's say, Matt, you're one of my investors. I You're capped at 10% of your net worth, excluding your primary auto, and a few other items in one particular loan. You could do as many as you want, but you actually have that cap. So that puts our
Is
investors.
that cap on that investor, or is that incumbent upon you as the lender under your lending licenses to make sure that you verify that that's the case, or you just take the representation from that investor, or
We
what?
take the representation. We need to document it. We're not required to verify that through a CPA or any of that. But if I'm having phone calls with you and you tell me,
Sure.
"Hey, Brad, I only got XYZ available. I'm new to real estate. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to rely on this income from my investment." I'm not putting you in any loans with us. I'm going to tell you it's not a good fit. So it's on what the investor discloses to me, but then also I'm making that final decision if we're going to formally onboard them and put loans in front of them or not. If someone tells me they're extremely experienced, we're walking through the foreclosure process. We're doing the ins and outs of our processes. I like to meet all of our investors in person if I can. That's not always easy in the beginning, but we have our internal checks and balances we have because the DRE does have an investor suitability requirement. They have a form that we collect that it's two
Yeah.
pages. It's I think it could be beefed up, so we take that and then I document conversations on
Yeah.
top of that.
But
But
there's
we're not.
some requirements on your end to deal with what amounts to some suitability requirements that would typically be imposed upon registered investment advisors, which I presume you're not, right?
No,
Is
we're
that the whole
not. We got
word?
That's a very dangerous word, advisor, as well. I see it thrown around
Exactly.
quite loosely in our space, and it's we're selling a security at the end of the day, but we qualify for originating loans under a DOE broker's license. We get certain exemptions.
Well, there's an exemption, right, for if you're selling, because you're not even fractionalizing it, so you're selling a single trust deed to a single investor. And did you say you guys will go up to 10 million bucks?
We do, and that's it. More of a family office investor we have.
Yeah, and that cannot be more than 10% of their income. So they clearly, that's a super wealthy. I mean, that I would say, in my experience, Brad, and I've dealt with hundreds, if not thousands, of private lenders over the years, and everybody does it a little bit differently, right? A lot of people will fractionalize, some people will do the individual trust deed model that you're talking about. A lot of them will end up doing a pooled investment fund. So you've chosen to go this route and it's working. Being able to get investors that can write that big of a check, that's oftentimes very challenging for managers, but it sounds like you've been able to get. So tell us just a little bit about how you've chosen this structure and how you've made that work. It's impressive.
So we chose this structure because that's all I ever knew. So it's not that I weighed options on it. We're now you and I have had conversations about this. We're weighing options on different structures going forward, but based on the investors we haven't really been. Money hasn't been the issue. Quality of deal has been an issue. I understand the requirements and the legal implications of selling trustee investments to investors. The improvement of loan docs and technology out there for docs is extremely streamlined. I mean, we were doing a mail merge when we first started our company. Now everything is cloud based. So we've actually been able to continuously onboard high net worth individuals. And I say we've been passively raising capital over the last few years because it's been a quality of deal that's been an issue. But with everyone pushing fund route, there is a desire, some high net worth, that they just don't want to go into a fund or they don't want to put all their eggs in various funds. And we could go down the reasoning behind that in a little bit. But so that referrals have been great from our current investors that have buddies, just like private lenders are in their tight network. High net worths have their network, and you're not going to just be going to a doctor's conference and onboarding physicians. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
At times I like to say it's just kind of luck. You'll stumble into an investor and have conversations. It takes time to build that rapport. I may have a conversation with an investor today, and they may not on board for 2.5 years. It's just not a
Yeah.
right fit, and they want to
Yeah.
make sure we're going to survive. And that was the biggest challenge we had when we first started our company.
Sure. Yeah, and I always say to people like there is no one magic formula that works for everybody. Some things are better for some funds are not for everyone,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes the one at a time model works beautifully. Sometimes the fractionalization model works beautifully, although that one can get super cumbersome, but every one of them has their pluses and minuses and trade-offs. So it sounds like you've considered a fund in the past and you might consider it in the future. In your mind, like why would you or wouldn't you choose to do something like that?
I am of the belief that a fund in the future is in our cards. I feel for if you're looking to scale uh, at a faster clip, I feel that fund model is a big part of that. I have some good friends in the industry that only fractionalize and they do massive amounts of volume, but their infrastructure behind the scenes and their team is strong to support that.
Yeah,
Um, So you don't necessarily need a fund to scale. You can fractionalize, but we don't fractionalize ours.
yeah,
I think you could get stickier capital once you go the fund route. You could open up the doors for potentially smaller investors that don't necessarily want to write a check size for $1.5 million, but they're okay contributing 200,000 or 250. The benefits of the fund, that capital, in theory, that capital is always working for you. You are in theory, diversified against across various loans. I would make an argument, though, that some funds, not all of them, are trying in a position now where they have raised too much money too fast, and now they're trying to compete with the institutional loan structure to where they just have way too much construction loans on the books right now or high value add to where 3 years ago all their stuff was at 65% ARV. Now you fast forward 3 years, that the risk on that portfolio can drift. And you as a passive
no
investor may not
question.
be aware of that.
Yeah, no
So there are
question.
challenges on cash flow, I would say, on keeping it going. And with us, the biggest challenge, and it's a mental block I have on going fund route. I feel we would raise the capital efficiently. It would just be being in a position to have to get it out too quickly. And
And
that's
that's a key
something that
point that you made a few minutes ago. You said capital wasn't necessarily the constraint. Finding deals is the constraint. What do you see happening out in the market in today's world? Kind of what do you attribute that to? Where do you think it's going? But what is the environment for loans out there right now?
so you go to school, your very first finance class you take, they tell you you're going to take more risk, more return. In theory, that's how it works. Right now, especially in the fix and flip and value add space, the risk return profile is, pardon my French, a little fucked up. It's upside down. You have increasing leverage and your and rates are going down. Back in 2013, when I first got into it, it didn't matter how experienced you were, leverage was consistent across the board. 12% interest, 3 points origination. Now you have lenders cranking out 97% loan to cost, 100% of everything. On paper, you look at these recorded deeds of trust, they're like at 120, 130% of the purchase price. You have borrowers coming in with maybe 5% skin in the game. Most of that 5% is probably not even their own capital. So that's what it's like right now.
Is that right? I mean, it sounds a lot like 2005 and six and
But the difference is this is hard money construction deals being cranked up and funds being sold off on the secondary market, slid into these securitizations. And there are some really good operators out there. I'm not saying all this leverage is bad. I was talking to someone the other day. They're like, but they're only offering that to some of the more experienced borrowers, right? I was like, we have lost deals to brand new rehabbers at 95% loan to cost. We have seen borrowers that have had NODs filed in the last year and a half get this leverage and pricing. So when transactions are down and you have a bunch of money chasing the same type of product, that's when you get leverage slightly increasing each month at 92% loan to cost, 95, 97.5. And then you have interest ticking down, ticking down, ticking down. And then before you know it, you're at 100, damn near 100% of everything in the low nines. So we have the past few years been doing more commercial deals to where we'll do multifamily, industrial warehouse, and even select office to where we're at 50 to 60% loan to purchase price on these. I could justify pricing that at a lower interest rate versus asking my investors to take on this additional risk for a lower return. So that's how we're able to be a little bit more malleable in the marketplace.
Isn't there, I mean, I keep hearing about there's a big shortage of housing, particularly in California. How much of that do you think, insulates people from some of the risk you're describing, or does it at all?
It At the end of the day, it's skin in the game. Cash is king. And I have said over the past couple of years, I've been more vocal about this. All the markets need to do is trade relatively flat for some of these deals to start going sideways because there's going to be no one to do a refi and recapitalize that loan. In California, over the last 12 months or so, it has been trading relatively flat. Some pockets have pulled back 5 to 10%, some have bounced back up. Anyone listening on here could go to the California Association of Realtors website, and they actually do a great job at posting historical data going all the way back to the Great Recession. So as every part of our month end close, I look at these numbers. I think it's been all the cheap money locked into the marketplace that is preventing people from selling their homes versus, um, lack of housing is part of the problem. Supply issue is part of the problem. But we have a lot of that 2%, 3%, 4% money locked in. And that is going to take, for someone to sell that home at that rate, it's probably going to be a life-changing event that forces them to sell. And until we have massive unemployment going through the roof and people forced to sell their homes again, I don't think you're going to see property values really take a huge hit in California. But for that high leverage and those construction deals and 75% to 80% ARV, you don't need the market to pull back for those to start taking some hits. And I think we're starting to see that right now. And I think in the next 12 to 18 months, I think you are going to see that high leverage start to rebalance, start to come down a little bit. And I think they're going to have to start ticking up their interest rates as some more pain gets on the books. That's just my own personal call. Some others
Yeah.
would say I'm batshit crazy, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't be the first person to ever call you batshit crazy, right? So, so you said something about commercial. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's something we always did when we were doing a lot of hard money loans. I mean, this is going back 20 years ago, but kind of coming out of the whole, it was a similar run up. And again, I'm in the administration, fund advisory and administration business these days. So I have a lot of clients that do this. So I always kind of look on, like now I'm on the sidelines, kind of watching other people playing the game, right? Instead of in the game myself. But back in those days, it reminds me a lot of, it was hard to go out based on pricing and be competitive without just completely undermining your underwriting standards in those days on the residential side. But I found that with commercial, you could find pretty good deals where you had borrowers that were highly likely to pay at much better loan to values, right? And there was a lot less competition in terms of people being willing on the secondary market or even in the private lending space.
Mhm.
Is that what you're seeing in commercial, or why do you go down that road? What do you think? What is the environment out there like that and on that product type?
So, like I said, cash is king, skin in the game. Skin in the game drives performance more than credit. So I don't care if a borrower has an 800 credit score and 30 active loans with me. If they're requesting 95% loan to cost, all it takes is two deals to get stalled out for that to start to fall off the rails. If that same borrower is coming in with 35, 40% to close, he's going to figure out how to keep making those payments one way or the other. There's room for a potential refi, or they could sell the property on that. So with commercial, it's more of a skin in the game, and we feel we could reduce the risk of our portfolio with more cash in that particular deal. Now, underwriting commercial comes with its own set of risks.
Yeah,
We talk to some guys
different
that
beast.
only do fix and flip SFRs, and I tell them we'll do no appraisal, non-recourse, no due diligence deposit on some commercial deals, and they're like, "You're crazy! You'll do no appraisal, no this, no that." And I'm like, "Well, we pay for all the data that a lot of appraisers use, so we could
Yeah,
get comfortable
exactly.
with value. Units are exchanging hands. A big risk we have on commercial or environmental concerns on that. But then also, if a borrower is coming in with 40% to close, I, I'm not, this is going to come across as cocky and a little over the top. But if I'm off on my value by 40 to 50%, I should not be in this damn industry, especially with the resources to value properties that are at my fingertips. My network and the investment sales broker side of things. I have people just a phone call away to kind of say, yeah, they're buying reasonably at a good price. So we like that. And we like the performance. Now, the exit strategy is a little tricky. And I think that's where
Yeah.
some people get concerned going into commercial, saying, hey, I don't know how they're going to pay me off with the debt markets, how they've been the past couple of years. We're the belief. I'm at my value is 55, 60% of the purchase price. We'll do extensions till we're blue in the face at that leverage.
Yeah.
And
Especially at
it,
12%.
well,
But
I wish we were pricing things at 12%,
yeah.
but it's a tough cookie to crack on commercial. I go talk to a commercial broker and I say I do hard money, they're going to hang up on me. Uh, I go to someone on the real estate or SFR residential side, and I tell them I'm a asset-based bridge lender. They say I need to use hard money. They're the same thing. So it's your
Yeah.
messaging and delivery is slightly different between the two, and I think that was tough to crack.
I was talking to Kellen. He was at a conference this last couple days down there actually, and he was using the term fix and flip. He's like, no, 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 they don't like that term anymore. It's like it's got
RTL,
a
baby.
it's RTL. It sounds so much more institutional, doesn't it? RTL versus fix and
Uh,
flip.
um, Alternative credit, private credit, RTL, asset-based bridge, hard money,
Yeah,
bridge, all the same thing. Just their marketing departments are different.
yeah, yeah. How much of your commercial stuff you're talking about putting cash down and skin in the game and all that is purchase versus refi? So we ended up we did a lot. I mean, usually the people that could afford to put 30, 40, 50% down, were able to get a better loan than what I was going to offer them as a private lender, but did a lot of refis. What does that look like for you?
I would say we're probably 70% purchase, 30%
Okay.
refi on that. And our value add is not pricing, it's our ability to close in 10 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So being focused on our delivery with that, that helps with those purchases. We are running plan B most of the time on
Yeah.
the commercial stuff. And we're okay with that. And us not having a due diligence deposit allows for that to work. Some other bridge lenders will have a steep due diligence deposit and they can't really run things concurrently.
Yeah.
So when we have an investment sales broker that has a new listing going down, we'll give them a soft quote on that for bridge, just in the event their buyer needs a bridge loan.
Yeah.
Or a mortgage broker, they'll reach out to us very early on saying, "Hey, we're going perm route right out the gate. It's a 60-day close," and I'm like, "You want to call me in 45 days?" But we'll give them a soft quote at that, just so they know what's what's there as a backup for them. And what we've seen, especially on multifamily, industrial, if it's not SBA, especially on office or retail or industrial, skin in the game is comparable. Perm debt is not pushing 65, 70, 75% loan to value in most
No.
instances in California. They're in the 50 to 60% range.
Yeah.
So once you have an understanding of that, I don't need to negotiate against myself at 70% loan to purchase price on industrial when takeout's at 55.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's a conversation we could have, which helps, I think, add credibility to our understanding of how the markets are working behind the scenes. And we don't want to put that sponsor or borrower in a box. Even though we're okay extending our loans if they're performing, I don't want our borrower to be in our loan for 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
That means
No.
something went wrong with their strategy.
That's right. That's right. Well, hey, as we get to the bottom of the hour, everybody, if you guys have some questions, type them in there. We go a couple more minutes here with Brad, answer any questions you've got, and then say goodbye for the holidays. But so, uh, as you think back on your decision to start your business, Brad, it's like, are you glad you did it? And what was some of the early decisions you made that helped you kind of get to the point that you're at now?
So starting on, it was it was a big unknown. It's like, are people going to call us for
Exactly.
that was scary in itself. And it's like in the beginning, it's like, yeah, we'll just broker everything. But then we're fortunate that people just tracked us down. So being visible on LinkedIn, huge help for us very early on, and even now, that's been a
Yeah.
very good avenue for us. The infrastructure part of starting the company, that was tough. I look at how our first year, everything was Excel based. Everything was mail merge, everything tied out, but it was clunky. So we have a lot of checklists that caught a lot of errors. Um, the biggest regret I think Corey and I have, not to speak on his behalf, but I'm going to speak on his behalf because I talk to him
He's
more
not
than my
here.
wife, and I know he's listening on here. We regret not hiring a strong processor and closer early on.
Yeah.
I think if we made that commitment year one or two, we would be doing exponentially more volume today, 8 years later. We hit a cap on our ability, and that's a control issue that we had on letting go of some things. But that would be my biggest thing. Outsource loan servicing as we did on day one. Get a good loan origination software to have all your underwriting and everything in one clean spot. Have your strong doc set that is reliable and streamlined, and get a processor and closer to help out with those files, because those components are going to allow you to have a strong backbone and infrastructure to your company, and then add sales guys. So now we're looking to add an originator going into next year and start adding to the team. But early on, not hiring someone to assist, I think really hurt our volume. And we did
Yeah.
fine, but it's not what we're capable of doing. There's only so many hours in the day, and we want to be
Well,
home
isn't
before you.
one of the things you got to think about, right, as a small business, and is how much do you hire for when? Because taking on permanent overhead is hard. I mean, it's private lending. And I didn't ask, but I assume you're keeping some servicing spread on
Yep.
the loans that you guys are doing? Because, like, to me, that's the way that you build, a recurring revenue business in the private space is you can do is, if all you're getting is the points, then you're as good as your last month, right? You have a servicing
Exactly.
base that's generating some recurring revenue, and then you can afford to have some overhead, and you can sort of systematically and intelligently hire for the right, but doing it sequentially and then outsourcing. And I would say in today's world, you can outsource way more than you could back when I was started doing this, 25 years ago. So, I'm sure that's something you guys think about and try to keep your costs down, but have the infrastructure you need in order to be able to deliver on the services.
No, 100%. And loan servicing is something. So again, money has not been the issue, and it's still not the issue, especially with the flooded institutional. It has allowed people to build some very successful businesses with that type of capital. But if COVID foreshadowed and 2022 when interest rates foreshadow what will happen in the future, when they reprice and hit pause, it all stops all at once. So diversifying your capital stack will allow you to do that. So I think having the trustee option available, and you want to be able to maintain that servicing spread, uh, starting a fund, and you and I have chat about it. I I'm naive still on how I'm a CPA and I've read up a lot on funds. I am still naive on how that structure goes from the beginning, middle, and growth of a fund. And from talking to you about it, there's more of a, you don't have to go all in and push all your guys into a fund and try and get it out as quickly as possible. There's strategic ways to structure
Yeah.
it, which I think fascinates me the most. And it's not all kind of one box fits all. And that's what I think excites me the most going forward once we start going potentially into that fund route, that there are options and it's not big and scary, but it's also not easy.
Yeah, no,
So
it's not.
having the deal flow is imperative, but the right type of deal flow.
Yeah,
Because
and I would say you just said something there about, even though with all the experience you have, you still, apprehensive, or it's not the word you use, but, unknown. There's an unknown element, right? And the analogy I've used a zillion times is it's like having kids, right? You can babysit your niece and nephew, and you can read parenting books, and you can go to parenting classes and all of that stuff, but you don't really know what it's like to have kids until you have kids. right? I mean, and then there's stages, right? There's the infant stage and the toddler stage and the preschool stage and the elementary school and then middle school. And it's like, it's only through that doing it that you actually understand it. So I'd say you prep as best you can, but there's really nothing like doing it to learn it.
And you touch on something that I always like hearing, and I agree, and I'm the biggest advocate of it. I mean, separation of duties is such an important part of any business where you're handling other people's money. But there's many companies out there that do not implement that. We could outsource loan servicing, we could outsource fund admin, we could have a third party independent auditor for our
Yep.
books. And these are all great value adds to have when you're raising capital on that, because it's not just Brad and Corey and some interns we picked up that we've rebranded as 60 years of combined experience in the industry. These are actually
Yeah.
vetted third parties that are hyper focused and specialized in what they do. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that was not readily available 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. You want to give us a plug for the CMA conference here coming up in the
Oh,
spring?
very good. Yeah. So we have our spring conference coming up. Newport Beach kicks off March 18th. We're going to be having a pickleball tournament midday, and then we have a welcome reception. I'm going to have to start icing my
Just start
hamstrings and
training.
stretching
Yeah.
beforehand. And then we have a welcome reception Wednesday evening, full day conference on Thursday, some power pack panels, heavily compliance based business development, networking with other lenders in the space, attorneys, service providers such as you guys, Matt. Thank you guys for making it out. Verivest will be there as well as a wrapping up Thursday with the big happy hour. I'll be reaching out to Karin Hall with OC She brings out her investment association out to network on Thursday evenings. Karin, I owe you a call if you're listening in on this. And then we have about a half day on Friday where we wrap it up. Uh,
There's some golf in there somewhere.
there's always golf, baby. If you're coming in town a day early, you call me and we'll go play. So I think we might sneak out on Tuesday, which is not really within the 18th to the 20th. We'll try and sneak out probably very early Wednesday morning. I'll probably play before pickleball and then parlay it into pickleball right into happy hour. But it's gonna be a great conference. We got a lot of new vendors coming out. And if, like I said, if you have any exposure to California real estate, either on the investment sell side or you're a mortgage broker, come network with all the decision makers of asset-based bridge lenders from across the state of California. If you're a lender yourself, compliance and legislative risk, I think, is the biggest risk anyone has in doing deals in the state of California. Come talk to some attorneys off the books over some drinks and ask some questions. You get some great value add and good conversations with the attorneys and service providers that will make sure you're avoiding the potential grenades in your file. And it's a good time.
Yeah, no, I've been in a lot of conferences over the years and private lending especially, and it's a good conference. So recommend it for anybody active in California. Brad, pleasure, man, to chat with you again, to catch up, and thanks for being on our program. We appreciate it.
I love it. And guys, just I know Matt said questions. No questions are off limits. Uh, Kylie and Matt had asked me ahead of time what we wanted to go over. It's your guys' show, so let's run with it. So any questions you guys have, let's go.
Yeah, there's just a couple of questions here. You guys, and these are pretty. You only lend in California?
Yeah.
That's
So yes, with our investors, we only lend in the state of California. If we wanted to go out of state, we would tap in on a correspondent program. We don't fund on correspondent programs. So yes, we are only in California with our investors.
okay. What's the most efficient loan origination software for private debt? Do you guys use an LOS system or not as a single investor, single trustee investor, or what do you think?
But so what was the question again on what
Loan
loan origination?
origination software for
Yeah,
private debt.
we use one. All of them will market themselves ready to roll right out of the box. None of them are. So the biggest thing we look at is what's their help center look like? What's their helpline? There's some great providers out there. One will work for us, it won't work for you, Matt, and it won't work for the third guy. So I would
Yeah.
recommend narrowing it down to three or four. We have a couple good ones that come out to our conference. That will be there in March. And then I'd also reach out to offline. I could share some lines. As president of the CMA, I gotta be careful not to
Yeah,
directly push certain
yeah,
ones. But if you have recommendations, they could email me afterwards, and I could share three
yeah.
or so.
Feel free to reach out to Brad directly. What's one thing you would not outsource as a fund manager?
One thing I would not outsource, me personally, underwriting. I wouldn't outsource that. I'd keep that close to the chest. If you have experience in breaking down deals and underwriting, I think you could over automate yourself out of existence, especially when it comes to property valuation. So I wouldn't outsource that and just say, hey, I got two valuations, I'm good to go. I think that is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. One last question. I know you alluded to this about division of duties, but how much of your time goes toward compliance, legislation, updates, et cetera, and legal versus how much time on the origination and the underwriting side?
So on the origination side, that is probably 10% of my time because 90% that's what Corey tackles for our company. The compliance and legislative side, that's always kind of a revolving door and always moving. You could probably capture 20-25% on that. Right when I think I figured it out, something else pops up. And then the underwriting and everything else, placement of our loans, post closing, that's the remainder of the time for
Yeah.
me personally.
Yeah, cool. Well, Brad, thanks again, man, for being here. I appreciate it. We'll see you here soon, I'm sure. And thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate it. It was a good time, Matt. Have a good one.
And everybody else, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. It's our last one of the year. If you guys want to follow me on LinkedIn, please do. I talk a lot about all things related to funds and a lot of private lending funds, et cetera. We're working on a bunch of stuff for 2026. So anything you want to hear about, let us know. We're working on some new services that we'll be rolling out. We're working on our webinar schedule for next year, our conference schedule. So feel free to reach out. Look forward to engaging with everybody in 2026. So thanks everybody for being here. Have a
Th-
happy holidays and a happy new year. Thanks again, Brad.
Thank you. And George, real quick, yes, you're right. Michael, you could call me after, and I'll share that with you.
All right.
All right, guys.